Yeah, okay. I'll wing it without the presentation. So hi everyone. I'm Charles Duze. I'm currently based in Seattle, Washington, and I'm a data science manager at Shopify. I've actually been at Shopify for about 2 months now, so pretty recent. Before Shopify, hopefully, I guess I can just say what Shopify is. Shopify, our mission is to make e-commerce better for everyone. And what that typically means is we want to enable anyone to start a business, and that could be entrepreneurs, single individuals, mom and pop shops, or even the large corporations. And what we're most known for is really helping people start up their online business. So you're able to set up a website, be able to upload your products and just be able to sell. And we try to take care of pretty much all the logistics so you can focus on growing your business and making profit. And you don't have to worry about building a website and infrastructure and all that good stuff. Before Shopify, I spent about a year and a half at Convoy. Convoy is a startup in Seattle. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to digitize the trucking industry, mostly in the US. The trucking industry still uses a lot of phone calls, paper, faxes, and all that stuff. And so we built a marketplace and apps and all that to really just bring technology to the industry. So I was the data science manager for that, leading the data science teams that support the marketing, revenue, and the shipper insights organizations. Before Convoy, I spent about a year at Zillow. There I led the data science team for consumer engagement. Zillow's the real estate website where folks can go online and look up homes and now actually purchase homes. And before Zillow, I spent about 14 years at Microsoft. There I started off as a software developer, software design engineer in test, and then went through the different phases, data engineer, data scientist, and all that good stuff. So that's pretty much where I had the bulk of my career. And before Microsoft, I spent about 3 years at an insurance company in New York.
Sorry about that.
No worries at all. So I spent about 3 years with an insurance company called the Mutual of New York in their IT tech department. I had also interned with them while I was there, while I was in college. So in terms of education, I'll start with college and I'll walk backwards. So I had my undergrad in computer science from Syracuse University, and then also my master's in computer science from Syracuse. And those were earlier in my career. And later in my career, when I switched to data science, thanks, Lewis. Later in my career, when I switched to data science, I really wanted to make sure I understood my stuff. So I went back and got my master's in data science from the University of Washington here in Seattle. Before college, so I came to the US for college. So before college, I actually went to, now we call it high school, but I went to secondary school in Enugu, so Federal Government College, Enugu. And then before that, I spent pretty much most of my life in Benin. So that's sort of a quick intro of me. I can go a couple ways. I can talk a little bit about how I think about data science. I can talk about my journey and all that stuff. I don't know what would be most relevant or how we want this to flow, or we can just leave it open to questions.
I think we can talk about the journey first, just to kick things off, and then your thoughts on data science after that.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So I actually kind of shared a lot in my experience, but I'll just give a quick context. Like I said, I grew up in Nigeria, came to the US for college. The original idea, like most Nigerian parents always push for, is that you can be anything you want as long as it's doctor, engineer, and all that. So I came to the US to become a doctor, but along the way, I kind of fell in love with computers and computer science, and figured I should switch to that. And so I switched degrees, switched colleges, so I could actually major in computer science. And one of the nice things that had happened was my aunt, who I was living with, encouraged me to take an internship, which is really how I got into the corporate world. And because of that internship, I had a job when I had graduated. And the key point from that that I always tell people is sometimes I didn't want to apply for the internship. It was my first year in the US. I wanted to enjoy, but sometimes people come into your life that really are an influence and set you in the right direction. And even though you're not able to see it yourself, they sometimes just listening to other people and taking advice is actually could be very instrumental for your career. At Microsoft, like I said, I spent quite a bit of time there. Switched up teams a bunch of times. Tried different things and eventually fell into data science from computer science. So that was kind of a nice opportunity and a nice privilege that I am grateful for, to be able to explore and really discover things that were new and things to try out. What else is interesting in my journey? Yeah, so the other thing is I guess it's never too late or never too early to learn something. Like I said, I had some degrees in computer science when I thought that was going to be my path, and then when I discovered it wasn't, that I wanted to try something different. Actually, before I went for my master's, I took a certificate program in data science, and it was a smaller investment, like a 9-month program, but it allowed me to really understand what I like about data science and if this was a field for me. Around that time, that was before data science became like, oh, the sexiest job or the hottest job and all of that stuff. I wasn't actually sure there was a career in data science. So I had talked to my mentor, and I'm like, should I spend time in this data science stuff, or should I just focus, continue being an engineer? And he's like, no, it seems like something's happening. It might be worthwhile. And so the certificate program sort of helped me understand, oh yeah, I really like what's going on here, but I also realized just how much more there was to learn, which was the reason I went back to get my master's. So once again, someone else, I think it's always good to have people to talk to, just able to bounce ideas off. At the end of the day, it always remains your decision, but it's just nice to have that opportunity to bounce ideas and get advice from people.
It's a question on that, like, how was the transition from software engineering to data science? Like, how did you find the transition? Was it, I guess, easier transitioning from that background? What did you find were the gaps that you had career-wise, like transitioning to data science?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I started, so maybe I'll go into a little bit more detail to add some color to it. So the way there were advantages in engineering, definitely having a computer science background, because the way my trajectory worked was, while at Microsoft, we were moving. So when I joined Microsoft, it was before shipping on the web became a thing. That was when you could buy disks of Microsoft Office. So we spent 3 years, we build in a silo, and after 3 years, we ship it, and we don't hear from our customers for another 3 years, until 3 years after we've built stuff. And so when we started building things online, it was really interesting because now we're getting data coming in real time, and we didn't quite know exactly how to do it, or how to handle it, or how to make sense of it. And so one of the things I had done, I had volunteered to be to pretty much try to make sense out of this, and understand how do we go from the raw data we're getting into actual insights that we can use. And from that sort of volunteer virtual team role, I ended up building the entire infrastructure for how we used our data. And so in building that infrastructure, one of the most important things was I had a background in SQL, just because during my internship, I had worked on with SQL in Access. And even though it wasn't cool then, but just having that experience sort of gave me an advantage in being able to help start up the building the infrastructure. So my SQL helped me get my foot into the data engineering door, and I was able to use that and my programming experience to be able to build out the entire infrastructure. And after I had built out the infrastructure, we could actually see data coming in, we could see numbers, we could design metrics. The question my GM had asked me at the time is like, okay, these numbers don't look good. What should we do about it? And he's like, oh, we should look at the standard deviation and all that stuff. And I had no idea what a standard deviation was. So my engineering background helped me to an extent, but I didn't know what a standard deviation was at that point in time. I'm like, holy crap, there is just so much to learn. And so there was a lot that I had to go back and learn that I wasn't, that my computer science background had not prepared me for. So pretty much I knew nothing about statistics. And that's one of the things that made me realize, there's just so much for me to learn. I will admit things like Python and all that were a bit easier because I had the computer programming, but the basic statistics, which I think is just as important, was something I had to learn. Now, there's a third piece to all of this, which is actually just business thinking, and it's something that often gets overlooked. And when I say business thinking, it's really just critical thinking. It's just being able to think and say, you know, let's put off technology for a second and let's just ask ourselves, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Let's get to the root of like what's the problem? What are we actually trying to achieve here? And being able to bring that in as well, I think it's a very important component, both for both as a skill that we should all develop and we all have. There is no there's no degree to get that. Each of us brings something to the table, so not underestimating that. But it's also something that if we're able to display, then it's something that's very valued by others, by other colleagues as well.
So on that note, Charles, like what did you find helped to like hone your critical thinking skills, like when you're transitioning careers?
Oh, sorry. Do you mind repeating the question? I missed the first part.
So what did you find like helped hone the critical thinking skills that you had to develop for data science?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I know everyone has takes a different perspective to this and brings something different to the table. For me, what was valuable was actually having, now I use the words having empathy for the end user. It's really being able to connect with the people who you're building. So if you're building software, you're trying to solve a problem, being able to connect to them and understanding sort of, where are they coming from, how do they look at things, what's important to them. That actually helps provide a perspective that many times is missing. And it adds pretty much to the innate, like each of us, I think, just has this ability to, like, we can all reason, right? And we all have our experiences that we bring to the table. And then being able to take that, tie it with the experience or the empathy for whoever we're building for, the problem we're trying to solve. And I think bringing those two together actually helps develop that. The other thing is that being able to listen. I know early in my career, I was very stubborn. I thought I had all the right answers and I didn't have to listen to anybody. But I think everybody, even those we disagree with, even those who we say, oh, your idea is wrong, they always bring a perspective, or there's always something that we can add to that. So my perspective about critical thinking skills is that it's not something that it's not so much something like maybe a maths where you learn a subject and you remember it. It's something that just continuously evolves, and it's really about taking different inputs and being open to receiving inputs from different places, and then sort of processing it with our natural abilities, and then creating something, and then testing it and see, does this work or should I try something else?
So on that note, you always hear that data science is very like it's open to people from any background. I guess from your experience and from like seeing other people get into data science in general, what are your thoughts on people who have a non-STEM background who are looking to get into data science? Like, is there a path for them that like that you would recommend in general?
Yeah, I think the nice thing about data science is that I think it's open to pretty much almost anyone. When I took my master's program, we had a bunch of people from different backgrounds. We had people from agricultural backgrounds, people from law, people who had never done programming in their life, and all of that. So it's open there to anyone. There's not like any special skills or anything innate about that separates one group from the other. Though the amount of effort you have to put in may be different. So if you've never had programming, then pretty much try to ramp up on those skills. Python's a very good language to focus on if you want to get into data science. I mean, there's R and all that, but I'm very biased towards Python, and I see the direction moving towards Python. So take whatever courses you need to do. The thing about the journey for everybody is different. Like, I watch a lot of YouTube videos for stuff I don't understand. Even when when I was in my master's program, I would listen to a lecture and I'm like, that didn't make sense to me, and I'll go on YouTube and I'll search, and 5 different people will explain it 5 different ways. And most videos are short 5 or 13 minutes, and I watch it and I'm like, okay, now I get a different perspective. Now it begins to make sense. With that, and even till today, I still watch YouTube videos just to learn stuff, because the data science is evolving really fast. You'll never learn everything you need to learn, and depends on where you're starting up from. It doesn't matter where you're starting up from. It just matters more how quickly you can catch up. There are going to be some basic things that people look for to kind of at least give you to kind of get your foot in the door. You should think about things like just having some basic SQL knowledge, being able to manipulate data, having some basic analytical skills, all of that stuff. But I think I want to emphasize that it doesn't matter where you're starting from. What matters is being able to find ways to kind of catch up wherever you're starting from. Everybody's playing the catch-up game in data science. So it just depends on where you're starting from and being aware of what you need, what's missing, where you need to spend more time to focus, and then finding the resources to help you, whether it's YouTube videos, online courses, programs, in-person programs, whatever works for you, whatever works for your style of learning, go for it.
And like from your perspective, what do you find helps a junior candidate stand out from the crowd? What would you recommend that they should do to, I guess, because it's very crowded field, it's getting more and more crowded in general. What do you think they should do to make themselves stand out from the crowd and just like to get a job, the first job that is?
Yes, no, that's a good question. I think, yeah, yes, I think when folks are hiring, they typically are looking for either the more senior experienced folks or the junior folks. I think the junior folks, what folks have to do is really to show potential and show your ability to learn. And some of this is some of this like whatever credentials you can provide is always helpful. So if you've taken like excuse me, if you've taken like a course or gone through a program, whatever the case might be, being able to surface that, okay, you have the knowledge, you have the education, right? That's one part of the equation, is saying, okay, I took this courses, so I took this program, so I understand what data science is about. And then the other piece is sort of like, what can you do or what have you done? And I think it's helpful to show that what you can do, whether it's through projects and either course projects or sort of volunteer projects and all that stuff that you've done. So I think having those two on your resume, for example, sort of begins to create the opportunity. I think the biggest thing though comes to if you're able to get past the resume step in the interview. Like I said, at least when I think of hiring, and in most companies when we think about hiring, we're looking for multiple things, right? We're looking for, can this person do the job? And different companies value potential in different ways, but we're trying to answer, can this person do the job? And that question can be answered both by, does this person have the training and the context? Do they have the knowledge? And then do they have the ability? Have they demonstrated the ability? Or do they have the potential there? And so prepping for interviews and all that stuff. But the other piece I would say is sort of what people call soft skills, is now things about critical thinking, things about, oh, is this somebody I want to work with, kind of deal, right? How are you as a human being? But also in many interviews, you'll be faced with, there will be a technical portion, and that sort of table stakes. Almost everybody either knows that or they don't know that. It's sort of like a binary. But the more interesting one is being able to show how you can think and how you can approach a problem. And the best way to, at least in my experience, what's worked for me in being able to answer that is actually being in the experience. So if I'm doing a project, right, it's one thing to complete a project and it's one thing to have that on my resume, and that's all valuable. But what's also interesting is, how did I approach a problem? How do I think about the problem? What are all the alternatives, right? And how do I apply that to a different set of problems? In many cases, interviews would be like, tell me about a time when, or how did you solve this, and all of that stuff. And so when you think about problems, whether it's project you've done or what you're taking in school, it's not so much about knowing the right answer per se, but it's about showing, how can I take this and apply this to a multitude of problems. So in a sense, I would say it's sort of like knowledge, experience, but then the critical thinking part, and then just be a decent person there.
Okay, and like I guess from your junior years, what would you say the biggest struggles from a soft skills perspective that you encountered? And I guess based on that, what would you recommend for someone getting to data science to like what to do to work on their soft skills to just to, like excel faster in the actual work environment?
Yeah, a good question. And this actually may not even be related to just data science, but the first basic is sort of like just be someone that people want to work with, right? I talk about, so in many cases, right, if people like working with you, they'll make up for your gaps, right? And if people don't like working for you, they'll overlook a lot of your achievements, right? And so, and this doesn't mean that you have to be like a people pleaser or you have to kiss up to everybody. That's not what it means. It just means that really don't be a jerk, right? And it seems trivial that we'll be saying this, but it's interesting how many people don't follow that, and you're like, he's really smart or she's really smart, but I don't want to work with him, right? That's sort of the first basic stuff. The second is about storytelling. This becomes more important for data. And storytelling, you wrap a couple of things in there, which is communication and all of that stuff. But the work you do, you have to find a way to tell the impact of the story, right? And so it doesn't matter what model you build or what analysis you do, try to answer the question, so what? Right? Why should anybody care? And try to tell a story that would be relevant not just for the technical folks, but for the non-technical folks as well, right? I know this is a trivial example that maybe everyone, most people may be familiar with. Is like when you build a model and you're communicating with a business person, don't just talk to them about, oh, the precision score is this and the recall is this or the accuracy is that. Many times they'll just nod and smile because they don't want to admit that they don't know what you're talking about, but at the end of the day, they walk away not having any value. But think about like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Why did you build a model? And what's that telling you? Is it telling you that it's good enough? Is it telling you that, okay, you have more work to do? And how is this the first, like, translate whatever you find. And same thing with if you do an analysis and you have a chat or you find some solutions, don't expect the reader or the audience to go back and dig and sort of figure out for themselves what you're trying to tell them. Try to tell a story that's compelling. And the story is not just about the work you've done, but it's about who you are, right? And the other piece, and this sort of goes back to the first point about being someone that people want to, people like to work with or people think is good. There is a video on YouTube. You can look it up. It's by a lady called Kala Harris. It's a TED talk that says how to find the person who can help you get ahead at work. And she talks about these two types of currency, right? The performance currency and the relationship currency. Very early in your career, the performance currency is really what makes a difference, but the relationship currency is really like a boost, right? So performance currency is like, are you able to do what you were hired for and a little bit more, right? So figuring out what the expectations are and then trying to do just a little bit more than that, right? That sort of helps, especially in your very early years. And then the relationship currency is about having people become your advocate, right? Who's going to speak for you when you're not in the room? And so once again, if you're a jerk, it's way harder to find someone to speak for you. But if you're not a jerk and then you have your performance currency, you're doing what's expected of you and you're doing a little bit more, then it's a lot easier for people to actually say, I think this person's doing a great job and they can speak on your behalf even when you're not in the room. So the skills there really is, and how do you develop some of these, right? Part of it is sort of what we've talked about, storytelling, all that. The other piece is just empathy. It's sort of like being aware, both of yourself and people around you, being able to regulate your own emotions and other people's emotions. So yeah, what else? I'm trying to think. Yeah, if something else comes to mind, I'll probably share. But if I summarize sort of what I think of as soft skills, it's really this idea to be someone that everybody else wants on their team, right? And how you do that is it's really by being able to add value by the work you do, but also by how people feel by being around you. Or and this means different things to different people, so I want to be careful in like getting too specific. But I really want to also emphasize it's not saying yes to everything people say, but it's how you say no, right? It's how you challenge stuff. It's like no one would say this, but saying that, oh, this is a stupid idea is probably not a good way. But, oh, can you help me understand why you think about this? Because I was looking at it this way, right? It's being able to add value and make other people around you feel like, okay, I don't feel stupid, or I don't feel insulted, or I like being sort of aware of your own where you stand and where other people stand.
Speaking of awareness, it's very hard to be self-aware. When it comes to like not being a jerk, for example, it's very hard to be self-aware about what how people interpret how you speak or how you act in general. So on that note, how did you find like what did you do to build that feedback loop to understand if how you come off to people you work with is perceived as bad or good? How do you build that feedback loop to
Yeah.
improve?
No, it's a good question. There are a couple things I would say. One, by all means, feel free to have like a group of people that you trust. So if you go maybe have a presentation or a meeting and you have someone who you trust, right? You can come back afterwards and say, hey, I just wanted to get your opinion on this stuff. When I said X or when I did excuse me, when I said X or when I did X, how did I come across on all of that? Sometimes that depends on who the person is. Some people it's easy for them to give you feedback. Sometimes some people may just not want to hurt your feelings and all of that stuff. So pick wisely and listen carefully. Sometimes they may sugarcoat it, so you want to listen in there. The other thing though is just do a gut check, right? Sometimes when you're presenting, you can notice the expressions on other people's faces, not so much what they say, but how they react to what you say. You want to be careful too, because you're not a mind reader, but it's something that you want to actually just be aware of. Like if you're beginning to see certain things, then check it, right? If you're comfortable with them, you can ask. If you're comfortable with somebody else, you can ask them. But also pay attention to patterns, right? If you're having conversations and things are not working the way you expect, right? You gave a presentation about why we should do X, but everybody wants to do Y, right? Maybe don't immediately assume that they're all idiots or that they don't like you, but try to say, okay, is there something about how I communicated X that didn't get across the room, right? I'm not saying that it's always the case. I mean, there are always people that are difficult to work with and all of that stuff, but don't make the first assumption that, they don't like me or they're not, or they're idiots or they can't see what I'm saying. But maybe just ask, okay, maybe something about how I communicated this across may not have been the most effective way, right? And then watch for patterns. So listen to your gut, watch for patterns, and then confirm or verify, right? What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Oh, so yeah. The other thing, right, is that people have different motivations too, right? And so sometimes I have been in situations where actually when I was at Convoy, I was in a situation where someone was presenting a number, I was presenting a different number, and we came together and we looked at it, and we talked about it, and we realized my number was right. And but he agreed my number was right, but he didn't want to move forward with my number, right? And so in my early days, I probably would have said, oh my goodness, this guy's an idiot or a jerk or whatever the case might be. But then I sort of like checked back, right? And I tried to dig into it. And I actually realized that, he had a deadline in 2 days, right? And he didn't want to go back and change all his numbers because he was presenting to like the CEO and a bunch of folks, right? And so being aware of like, what are people's motivations? Sometimes they know the right answer is there, but what does it cost them, right? Or sometimes when I talk to folks maybe in operations where part of what we're doing is going to automate the what they're doing, there might be this fear of, okay, am I going to become irrelevant because of what you're doing? And so being able to also communicate that as well is helpful. So what I'll say there is like, Definitely, you can ask people, but know that the response you get may be varied. But more importantly, listen to your gut and then just check if things are not aligned. Like there's always a story we tell ourselves in our head about how things should go, and if things are beginning to deviate from that, then sort of look for patterns and begin to dive deeper into that. I noticed someone had a hand.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I was don't worry, go before me.
Okay. Thank you for your time, sir. I just have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
As it relates to critical thinking, I want to know if there is a pattern or if there is something you can recommend. How will I know if I'm improving in my critical thinking? What are the parameters to look out for to know that, okay, whether I've moved from point A to point B?
Yeah. That's a good question. One thing I would say is there are actually resources online. I've seen maybe do a search. Excuse me. Maybe do a search online for critical thinking. There are a couple good resources there that sort of like walk you through the steps of how to be a critical thinker. It's sort of like asking. The key thing there is always asking questions behind asking the questions why, right? And so there are a couple of resources that can help you sort of systematically do it, and that's sort of how you build the skills. In terms of how you improve, that's a good question. It's tricky because it's not objective, like, I moved from a 2.5 to a 5. And even as you develop critical thinking skills, there are times when you're going to be off and times when you're going to be spot on. So I would say it's maybe trying to look at outcomes. So if you're in a conversation, right, and a problem is presented, at the end of the day, you can look and say, okay, did I add new value to that, right? Is there something that we weren't thinking about before that I added a new perspective, right? And even if it doesn't happen, you can always go back like after the event and sort of think like, what could I have said? What could I have done differently, right? And then why didn't I say that? And how do I learn to say that in future? So for the first part of how do you develop critical thinking, by all means, you can look up resources online and kind of like begin to get a framework. Hopefully over time, it becomes like riding the bicycle where it sort of comes naturally to you. And then in terms of improving, one thing to think about is that it's not a sliding scale that you'll always improve and you'll never go back. Sometimes you'll get it right, sometimes you'll get it wrong. Don't be too hard on yourself. But the key is to say, okay, when I think about my conversations, am I beginning to add a bit more value over time, or am I having more missed opportunities, and what can I do differently? I'll just respond quickly to the TED Talk. You know what? Let me send the YouTube link here.
Am I free to ask my question now?
Yes, please. Hopefully, answer your question, Samuel, right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, sure thing, thanks. Okay, please, Emmanuel, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Charles. Thank you, Mr. Emmanuel. I have a question way back when you were introducing yourself and all, but I wasn't able to ask the question because I wasn't in the suitable environment. Okay, so you said your bachelor's degree, like your first degree was computer science, and you went further to have your master's and your further degrees on data science. Now, I want to ask because it's very crucial to me. I studied chemical engineering. Yeah, and I want to have a master's in data science. Like, so that deviation always haunts me sometimes, and I have this sort of inferiority complex. Like, oh, I'm not even from a chemical. From a computer engineering discipline or from a computer science discipline or maths or statistics. But mine is like way far back, even in the engineering field. So, what are the steps? What do I need to do to be able to compete, or do I even have a chance to? And that's the first question. The second one is I've always, I look through YouTube, attended webinars and sessions like that, and they always talk about finding your path because data science is like broad. You can have analysis on different sectors, on the retail, on the oil and gas, the energy sector, and what you have. So at this point, at this stage of development, do you suggest one should like streamline his or her career path to a certain sector of the industry, or it's open to whatever? Thank you.
Okay, Sheldon, thanks for the question. Let me start with the first one. I can say with a lot of evidence that it doesn't matter what your first degree is. You can always get into data science. But even your chemical engineering, it's an advantage, right? Data science, to be honest, is not anything too magical. It's just smart people with smart tools. It's just all it is. It doesn't matter what your previous degree is. You can always make the transition. And like I said, everyone starts from somewhere. There is no unique path to get to data science. Everyone's journey is different. Some may be easier than others, but it doesn't matter. Like, you find out what's missing and then you try to catch up. You mentioned something about inferiority complex. We can talk about that stuff all day and all year. Just know that it's just natural human behavior. Everybody has it. Everybody has it. I still have inferiority complex, and I've been in my field for a while. I know CEOs who have been vulnerable and say, they have inferiority complex and all that stuff. So it's there. Check it. See if there's something you can do, but then don't let it hold you back. Right? Like one general advice I like to tell people is like, don't be your own critic. It's not your job to point out what your deficiencies are for somebody else, right? Let them figure it out. And if they can't figure it out, then too bad for them, right? So you focus on, when you're talking about selling yourself or in an interview, by all means, focus on your strengths and what you bring. Don't come up with your deficiencies. If they can't figure it out, then that's not your fault. I mean, be self-aware, but it's not your job to focus on your deficiencies or to focus on like, oh, my shortcomings and this is where I feel inferior and all of that stuff. Everybody has it. Even your interviewer has that. To your second question, should you specialize? I'm going to give a very short answer and then I'll try to expand. No, absolutely not. And that's a really bad answer. So let me tell you what I mean by that. One, data science isn't specific to a field. So one of the things you may have picked up is in my career, even during data science, I have worked for a software company, I've worked for a real estate company, I've worked for a transportation company, and now I'm working for an e-commerce company. And I can tell you that I'm still using the same methods that I used in all three of them. The problems are still the same. Like when you take away you boil the problem down to the essential piece, it's still the same problem, right? There is some business need, there is some data that you have, and you have to go from the data to solve the business needs. The methods you use, like if you're using like logistic regression or a random forest, there isn't a random forest for oil and gas and a random forest for e-commerce, right? It's still the same stuff, right? So whatever skills you have, be transferable. The one thing I would encourage is like, when you think, it's sort of about this thinking, right? It's the way, one of the advantages you sometimes bring from going from one field to the other is that there is something about oil and gas, right, that you solve that actually could be a perspective that you can bring into the next industry you go to. So when you think about how you're developing as a data scientist, it's how you're developing your skill set, right? It's not how you're developing for a specific particular industry. Because the nice thing about data science is that every industry needs data science, and there are going to be things that you can take from one field to the other. The other piece to your question is there are these data science is a broad definition, right? And there are different things that different ways people define data science. And so some people think of data science. Oh, let me see if I can. I actually have okay, sorry. I had a slide for that, but I'll find a way to share that later. Okay, so when people think about data science, there are a couple different things that come to mind, right? There is the data engineering spectrum of it, which is, okay, I'm spending all my time in SQL, and I'm trying to move data from one form to the other, right? I'm trying to transform data, ETLs and all that stuff, trying to make it more efficient and all that stuff. And these are not like strong lines, but I'm just trying to create like three buckets, and I'll talk about them, right? And then the second bucket is like, okay, I'm an analyst, so I take data and I try to answer questions for it, right? And I answer questions either in the form of an analysis, I create dashboards, I create charts, whatever the case might be. But I'm playing with data and I'm answering business questions, right? So that's somewhere in the middle, more of a generalist. And then on the other end of it, there's like, oh no, I'm a machine learning engineer. All I do is I take some very specific subset of data. I don't really care what all the business problems are or the business context, but there's something I want to optimize, right? And that's what I'm going to focus on, right? To kind of give an example, for the first one, they may call you like a data engineer, and you're building all the tables and all the data repos that people are using. For the second one, they may call you a business analyst, and you're working with business partners, and you're answering questions, and you're having reports, and you're in meetings, and you're doing product analysis and all that stuff. And then for the third one, you're optimizing some kind of algorithm, right? Maybe it's some predictive algorithm or some recommender, whatever the system is, right? But you're focused on that. So most companies tend to break people into these three buckets. Now, the truth is that no matter what bucket you are, if you're in a company that breaks you up in this, having skills from the others, right, is also very important. And in many cases, some of them are ways to get in the door. So for most people, they may get into the door through sort of the data engineering, the ETL bucket, and then they expand their skills and experience, and then move into the analyst bucket, and then they move into the machine learning bucket, right? And most companies I've been at have been that way. At Shopify, actually, it's actually the first company I've been at that we don't have those barriers. So you're expected to do everything, and you're expected to know all the skills. But I love it, because then there are no barriers that says, oh no, you can't build a model that goes into production, or no barriers that says, oh, you can't do this, but you're sort of expected to, you have the opportunity to do everything, and it's actually part of an expectation. So hopefully I answered your question, Emmanuel.
Yeah, sure you did. Just to shed little light on the classifications you gave, the data engineering analysis part and the machine learning engineering part. I asked that question because, like, just like you said, at the very end, you always have a piece of data to work with, and they all go through the same process. On that machine learning engineering part, I know of like different models people use to do different things. Like someone that wants to go into sentiment analysis or stuff like that will probably be using NLPs, Spacey, those kind of models. Someone that wants to just run a normal predictive analysis might not need any of that. So I was asking that question just to know, okay, is there a particular part or section you should pay more attention to because you have a love for a particular industry?
A good question. This is my advice. Like, take it with a grain of salt. I would say focus on being a generalist first before you become a specialist. And what I mean by that is, even when you go into machine learning, start with the basic stuff, right? Most machine learning sort of fall into the three categories, right? Like unsupervised clustering. Make sure you're familiar with something in there, like k-means. There is some, the supervised, which could either be like a classification or regression. Make sure you're familiar with one or two algorithms in there, right? And that's sufficient to get you in the door. It's good to know what NLP is about. It's good to know what deep learning is about. It's good to know what all that stuff is about to have a conversation. But in many cases, especially in the early days in your career, when people want to solve NLP problems, they'll be looking for experts in NLP, and when you're unlikely to face that in your early interviews, right? But having these basic ideas of models, understanding how they work, like pick one or two in each of those categories. Like for clustering, clustering doesn't actually come up a lot in interviews, but understand clustering, understand k-means, but there's also hierarchical. Those two are the most common, right? when it comes to the regression and classification, common ones are like the logistic and the linear regression. Those are sort of like stable stakes. Kind of understand what's happening with those ones, and then pick sort of like one or two more. If a tree-based decision tree or like a random forest is another good one to know. And I think if you have those in your toolbox, those can be applied to like a variety of problems. And even when you begin to go into NLP or picture, video, and all that stuff, you will still the concepts. You'll be able to carry the concepts. So make sure you understand those concepts well, not just how they work, but how you evaluate them, right? Precision recall, all that stuff, because you'll need those at the next level. But to start off with, I wouldn't recommend jumping into NLP or deep learning or anything like that. So I think I can't recall whose hands was up first. If it was Opeyemi or Ayodeji.
Ayodeji was that?
I did. Okay, go ahead.
I've had a series of questions because I've been considering doing my master's in data science, but someone else also told me that I shouldn't waste money in doing masters in data science. I could actually learn it on my own. I find this very interesting, and I would love to get more clarity. And my second question is, some universities, like in Bradford, when I was applying, I applied for something called analytics and data AI analytics, something in management. It was under a management faculty. Is there a difference between that and doing a master's in data science, or are there no difference at all in that? And the third one, I say sorry.
No problem, go ahead.
I've been considering now, due to the internship we've been doing so far, which has been very great. So I've been thinking about something that could make me like more better, because I'm from the mechanical engineering field, which is just moving into the data science field. And I've always been considering software engineering is something, and we like work hand in hand in whatever we're doing. Software engineering is working with the data scientists, or like a feature in whatever they're doing. And so I was like thinking about learning front end and back into like creating, whenever to just start creating something like a project that I could actually work on, like a live project. So it's something I'm considering. So I don't know if it's on the part.
Yeah, all great questions. Let me think about, okay. So every hiring manager is different and every recruiter is different. But I'm gonna take a stab at saying something that may be controversial, and I know this is being recorded, so this is a huge risk. But anyway, in my view, experience seems to be probably the most valued. So if I was trying to hire a data scientist and I have someone with 3 years experience and someone without, the person with experience is probably a preferred choice, even if the person without may have a degree but no experience. Then after that, then having a degree is great, because it makes you stand out, and it depends on the role that I'm applying for. In the early roles, maybe a degree may not be as important, but as you get higher, more senior roles, and what the degree is, what I'm trying to get with the degree is that does this person have the rigor, right? Experience sort of tells me, can this person do the job? And then the degree says, does this person have the rigor, right, to do the job, to solve problems that we haven't yet described. So I'll think of a degree in that sense. Now, degree, I'm using degree as a big bucket, right? Because degree could mean like a master's degree, it could be a bachelor's degree, it could be a certificate program, it could be a boot camp, it could be all of that stuff, right? And every manager may evaluate that differently. And I think the program in there, right, is also evaluated differently, right? So like if you see someone with a business analytics degree versus a data science degree, unfortunately, data science degree would mean different things depending on where they got it from and all of that stuff. But the idea there is, the questions that we're trying to answer, right, is does this person have the rigor? And when you think about the degree of what's on the resume, right? Because at this point, you're just evaluating the piece of paper. That sort of tries to answer the question, but it's an imperfect way of answering the question, is the truth, right? Because I could get a degree and I could like pretty much barely have passed, right, by a point or 2 points, and somebody else who doesn't have a degree has a lot more experience or a lot more potential. So I think why I went to get my degree was for 2 reasons. One, I wanted the rigor, right? And this was a space that I wasn't familiar with. And so with or without the degree on my resume, I wanted to just know that I could do the job. I wanted to know what I didn't know. And so that's sort of the first motivation. I think that's probably the more important motivation, right? Is to get to a point where you feel like you understand what you need to know, what you don't know, right? And that could come in the form of a formal master's program, a boot camp, whatever works for you. Like I made the explicit choice to do an in-person program because I don't learn very well in online programs, right? Life gets too busy and I fall behind. But I know what works for me, right? So figure out what works for you and just make sure that you understand the rigor. And then the second piece is just being able to cross the resume hurdle, because a lot of people, like we said earlier, it's there are a lot of the field is becoming crowded. So what makes your resume stand out? The degree helps, but it's not a requirement and it's not all that there is. I think it's sort of like thinking of the full package. It's sort of how do you get your best representation on a piece of paper that someone's going to review in less than 2 minutes, right? And so, and the other thing I'll just share, this is just like general resume tips. Try not to list things, but show impact. So when I look at resumes and I see someone that says, I'm familiar with logistic regression or that stuff, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But and then someone says, I built a logistic regression on to solve a business problem at X company. I'm like, okay, that's even better, right? And then they're like, oh, I built a logistic regression at this company to solve this problem, right? I'm like, whoa, let's talk, right? That's interesting. So when you're working on your resume, thinking about your resume being sort of, in many cases, the first chance to get your foot in the door, try to make your resume speak out for you. So it's not just a list of, oh, I know this, but talk about, okay, this is how I have applied it. And this is even better, this is the impact it had. Hopefully I answered your questions, and let me know if I missed any of them.
Yes, you answered. Except from the last one about learning front end and back end relation.
Yes. So front end and back end directly for data science would not be an expectation. In that you would not be expected as a data scientist to build production level front end and back end. That being said, it doesn't hurt. You may build some front end or back end stuff internally. If that's a passion, by all means, go for it. What it does help too is that it just creates a different way of thinking, or just helps you bring more value. So if it's something you're passionate about, then you want to explore, by all means, go for it. No knowledge is wasted. Like I said, when I took my SQL, that was in 2001. That's when I learned SQL, 9/11, actually, I was in the class then. And then when I used it was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years later. That's when it was, it added value to me, right? It differentiated me. So there's no knowledge is lost. That's something my mom always used to say. If you're passionate about something, go learn it, but it's not a requirement to be in data science that you know front end or back end engineering.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. Okay.
Sorry, good evening.
Oh,
yeah, good evening, Charles. Thanks so much. Like, you really said a lot. So I just want to go to the aspect of landing your new job as a data analyst. So currently I work as an analyst, right? But there are limits to the tools we use now. So basically, you expect to just use some basic reporting tools, Excel, Power BI, and all of that. And yes, you have passion for other side. Let me say the data scientists were using all of this Python and all of that. So you just realize that because you are not using it in your current place of work, even though you are learning, there is no avenue for you to even put it into practice. Then you realize that you take a course, you think you know it. After a while, you still forget. It's always that kind of not stable in your head, right?
Yeah.
So now you now realize that you want to go to maybe another organization, or you want to look for the next better offer, and you are saying the requirement for you to learn the next data analytics job, and you are saying them list like 20 things they want you to know.
Yeah.
So how do you, like, some of them want as little as you be a BI using SSS and all of that, to using Python, knowing ML, all because you want to take a post. So it's more like a challenge for someone that, okay, my current work post, I'm not using all of these things. And the rest that you people are looking for, I don't even have the practical experience. So what would you suggest? Like, how do I get to know, okay, these are the tools I should keep learning, whichever way it comes? And how do you get to convince your next employer that, okay, even though I have not been using all of these tools before, I'm still an experienced hire. I'm not a graduate trainee any longer. Something like that.
Correct. That's a good question. Thanks for asking. So the first thing, I'll break your question into different parts. So the first part is like, how do you know what skills you need for your next job, right? So what I do there is I actually go look up the job descriptions for the next job I want, right? And I try to see what are they asking for. And I see if I have those skills or if I don't have the skills, right? If I have the skills, great. If I don't have the skills, how do I do it? Now, I know everyone's mileage will vary what I'm about to say, but I do like the idea of being paid by my current employer to develop the skills for my next job, right? And what I mean by that is there are very few cases where someone will come up to you and say, hey, Opeyemi, I think your next job is going to be this, so I'm going to give you a project to help you do that, right? But instead, what would happen, right, and what tends to work well, and I say this, I'll say this in an ideal case, and then we can figure out how it applies to each individual case. But what works well is to say, okay, I've been given a problem, right? Remember what I said about doing what's expected of you and doing a little bit extra. So I've been given a problem, right? And they want me to solve X, Y, and Z. And maybe they're expecting the result in Excel. Okay, at the minimum, I'm going to solve X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to solve it in Excel. And I'm going to have that ready, right? Then now I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to try and solve X, Y, and Z in Python, right? And I'm going to solve X, Y, Z, ABC in Python, right? And then the stuff I've learned somewhere else, I'm going to try to add. So essentially, I'm trying to add value, right? So that when I go back to them, at the end of the project, a couple things have happened. First and foremost, I have solved X, Y, and Z, and I've given it to them in the format that they want. Whether it's exactly Excel or I gave it to them in Python, and they're like, oh my goodness, this is the greatest thing. But the bare minimum is I have to meet what they asked me to do. Then I'll be like, oh, you like that? But see what else I did, right? And I did this in Python, or you don't even have to tell them I did it, but like, see what else I did, right? What you have done there is that you've taken a business problem and you have gone beyond, right? And in doing that, you have learned and you have put in practice exactly what you want to learn, right? A new skill set. Now, all of these are critical, right? When I talk about critical business thinking or critical thinking, that's exactly what it is, right? That's an aspect of it. It's like you take a problem that's unformed, right? And you're able to find a solution that solves it in a better way than what was being asked for, right? We call that like thought leadership and all of that stuff. It's a freaking big deal, right? Especially as you mature in your career. So being able to have that stuff is important. The second piece is the point you made, which is like sometimes you learn stuff, but if you don't put it into practice, right, you'll tend to forget. And what I found out is that when I'm in interviews, right, and I get asked a question, if it's something that I've actually done, I just have to go to my memory and say, oh, how did we do that? Why did we do that? And it's easier for me to explain stuff, right? Even if they're not asking me about my experience, but they're asking me to explain a model, right? I can just think back, what were the steps I took? What did I do? Why did I do that? What are the decisions? And that's a lot easier. If I read it, in many cases, I'll forget it if I didn't apply. So my advice to you would be, one, be aware of the skills you need. There are very few cases, unless you have a great mentor who will tell you what you need, right? So think about the job you want to go for, figure out what the skills are required for that job, figure out what you have and what you don't have, then begin to create opportunities for yourself in your current role where you're able to deliver on what's been asked and then do that a little bit extra, right? And in that a little bit extra, it's a benefit to your current company, but it's an even bigger benefit to you because you're learning new stuff and you're gaining the practical experience. Okay, cool. Hopefully that answered. If not, do let me know. I see Louis, you have your hands up.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all my
All right,
questions.
sir. Thank you, Mr. Charles. Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me? I think Louis was gonna go, but is it okay? Louis goes and then we'll come to you, Solomon.
Can you go first, Louis?
Louis, can you hear us? We can hear you. Okay, we can come back to you, Louis.
Okay,
Solomon had a
so my question has been answered. I was still
Okay.
fine. So I was want to know what they have experience. So do you have maybe then like any plan for young learners like us who are just learning maybe for the first time or are still very new? I will not have this work experience anywhere else. Are there plans for people like us? And then
sorry, I didn't
as
hear
a
the first part
manager,
of the
I don't
question.
know. I believe you. Okay, so like we now are just learning data science, and everybody when you see people want to employ, they want people with some level of experience. So is there any chance for maybe people who are just getting new to the field, maybe let's say like at Shopify now, we used to get in maybe as interns, probably in volunteering role or in whatever way just to gain more experience apart from maybe what you have learned. And then as a manager, I believe you work with several people in different roles in data science. You're talking about data engineering, but I still want to know more. Like as a data engineer, what's maybe the specific role of engineer? Is it that it's an advanced form of maybe a higher level realizing when you're in data science, or it's entirely different parts of it, so which you just go directly? Okay, that is all.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Okay, good question. So the first, I know it's completely unfair because everybody's like, oh, we want you to have X years of experience, but then they are looking for people with X years of experience. So how do you get the X years of experience without first getting the opportunity? What I'll say is look for some way to get in the door. It doesn't matter how you get in the door, get in the door. So a couple ways to get in the door. Definitely the internships is one way to get it. The other is some people actually, some companies have a distinction that says business analysts, right? And sometimes the expectations for that is more for entry-level folks, right? So when I was at Convoy, we created a business analyst role, which was really for people to who were early in their careers, right? And then you sort of gain some of those experience and context, and then you can move into the traditional data science role. The other piece I would say is start from where you are, kind of maybe to my previous comments. Both at Shopify and at Convoy, people could transfer from one role to another, right? And so we have people moving from operations into data science. And it's really what I said in just slightly more formalized, right? Where you have you in your current job as an operations specialist, for example, you are delivering what an operations specialist is doing, but there are probably going to be a couple questions or a couple things that that need data analysis in some way, right? No matter what it is, no matter how simple, and then just be able to tack that on, and then sort of build your experience that way. I know this is not going to be everybody's experience, but I'll share it in case you'd find it inspirational, is that nobody offered me the job, right, to move into the next role. I sort of was doing it first, then I got the role. So what I mean by that is when I was at Microsoft, I was a software engineer, and that was my official title. And I sort of, like I said, volunteered, right? It was sort of a side gig. I had my day-to-day job I had to do, and then I was trying to work with this data stuff. And the way it turned out for me I was actually good at what I was doing with the data stuff, and they liked it, right? And they wanted more. And then there was not enough time for me to do my day job and to do this. And they're like, you know what? Forget your day job. We're going to give it to somebody else. Just focus on this stuff, right? And then that's sort of how I sort of got that opportunity, right? And even then, my title was still software engineer, but my day job, everything I did was no longer software engineering, but data engineering. And as I was doing that, they're like, okay, tell us more about this data science stuff, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. And that's when I started getting my start doing my certificate and all that and learning about the data science stuff. And I started to do the data science stuff, and then I felt like, I was learning a lot about it. I actually was the only data scientist on the team, but I could fake it, right? I went to an interview. I prepared for the interview. They asked me, I went for a data science interview. I wasn't a data scientist then. They asked me data science questions. I answered it. Luckily, some of the stuff I had prepared for just came out, right? And I nailed it, right? I got it. So unfortunately, it's going to be very rare, or maybe not always the case, that the opportunities will be right there for you. So the way I sort of think about it is start from where you are, or get an entry position that's a good stepping stone, and then build from that, right? And the skills may come before the job, right? Sorry, I'm gonna read. Okay, the skills may come before the opportunity, right? They say luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right? Just be doing the preparation with the steps wherever you are, and then hopefully you'll develop enough, right, to cross that hurdle. Hopefully I answered the question. You talk about certificate programs. I'm not okay. So from my experience, I got a certificate program in data science, but there's lots of certificate programs that go by different names: data science, business analytics, machine learning, all that stuff. They are all like each one means different things. Honestly, there isn't like a standard definition. I would the titles are good because sometimes that's what people figure out on the resume, but I would say focus on more like what it's teaching you. I have a bias, and many people do have a bias. More experienced folks have a bias towards simple is better than complicated. So if I'm looking at somebody at entry level and you have deep learning, I actually get worried, right? Because especially if you don't have the basics, right? I'm like, okay, what does that mean, right? Because sometimes you want to solve problems in the simplest way before you go to deep learning, right? So I would focus on sort of certificate programs, especially earlier in your career, that sort of helps with the basics, right? Because those are the skills that are transferable, that are applicable every day. And then after you have a basics in that and you're comfortable, then you can jump into the deep learning piece.
I think Solomon had a question some time ago. Do you want to mute your mic, Solomon?
Hello, good evening, sir.
Okay, sorry.
Hello. So I didn't catch what you said, Emmanuel.
I think Solomon had a question some time ago.
Okay.
Do you want to unmute Solomon?
Hello.
You can go first, Edwin. It's fine. Whoever's ready, I suppose.
Hello. Thank you so much, sir. Hello, yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear
Hello,
you now.
sir.
We can hear you now, Solomon. We can hear you now.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, your sound is breaking a bit.
Yeah. Did you want to type your question in the chat, Solomon, and I can take it from there?
Thank you, Charles, for the signing up. Can you hear me, please?
You're breaking in and out.
Yeah, my internet is a bit unstable. I'm sorry, it's a bit unstable.
No problem at all. Do you want to type it in the chat and I can read it from there?
Okay. Let me do that.
Actually, we can hear you now, so maybe we can give it a shot.
Following up from what Okwe asked the other time. Now, looking at your own background, you are coming from where you build the algorithm first, from having the analytical knowledge. Now, there are a lot of people who have this analytical knowledge very well. They can explain the results from logistic regression, from random forest, or all kind of machine learning and some other statistics, but they don't really have this knowledge. They can't really build algorithm. So now, coming from having knowledge from the two backgrounds, which one should one focus attention on the most or first? Should I go for the knowledge and the statistics knowledge first, trying to know how to analyze the situation, the results from the algorithm, or trying to know how to build the algorithm first? Which one should one focus attention most on at the beginning?
Yeah, I'd say in the beginning, focus on understanding. There are very few people that build algorithms. Like, we all use libraries that somebody else has built, especially in like 80% of the situations, right? There are very few situations where you have to build algorithms. Like, I built an algorithm during my master's program, and I haven't built one since. I tweak algorithms, right? I understand, like, there are things you can tweak and all of that stuff, but especially for somebody starting off, if I had someone start off build an algorithm, I'll be very disappointed, because I'm not going to trust the algorithm. When we built algorithm in schools, even with all the guidance and all that, our algorithm still underperformed the basic algorithms you'll find out in like the libraries. So there is no value to building an algorithm that already exists. There is huge value in understanding how the algorithm works. There is huge value because you can actually tweak the data, the input data, or you can better interpret the outputs. But because you understand how the algorithm works, but there is no value that I can think of for someone in their entry level to build algorithms. Even if that's what you want to do, if you don't have the basic foundation, it will be challenging to build the specific algorithms. And just to make sure I'm clear, I'm answering the right question. Is like, when I think about building algorithms here, I'm thinking about building my own version of logistic regression, right? There is no value to me building a new logistic regression. Using the logistic regression that somebody else has built, or building a process around that, definitely adds value. But building my version of logistic regression, it's not something I'll recommend anybody. I'll not recommend anybody does because they want to build algorithms. It's good to do that to understand how the algorithm works in terms of learning, but not to, like, in practical, in a business setting, you wouldn't be expected to build algorithms. You'll be expected to understand how they work and how to use them.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think Edwin had a question. Do you want to unmute your mic, Edwin?
Hello. Okay. Evening, Charles. Evening, Emmanuel.
Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity. You've said a lot concerning, you have actually shared a lot of light to certain questions. But my question is, actually for me, I did statistics and a little of computer science, and I struggle with programming. I fall in love with using any of these statistics tools, like the Tableau. I enjoy using Tableau and but programming, when it comes to programming, it gives me a lot of challenge a little from the beginning, and I actually need a lot of attention on that as well. So in this regard, can I actually focus on focus my attention on using the tools that I'm very good at, and maybe developing a little programming knowledge? And secondly, in African content, in Africa, as an African person, I discovered the data analysis that is still fresh, and a lot of people, there's no good hands in taking the class. Like you said, you are not fans of online, direct online. I think I have some kind of similarity with that. Not that I've not been good in this program, but I feel when I see somebody in person and I'm in the class who can put me through, I get more better. So in this regard, now that I'm in this class and I've gained few. I think my best class was when I did Tableau. I think that was then SQL. I think those are the two places I actually enjoyed. The other ones I didn't enjoy. So in trying to get the basics right, is it good I put more effort on these two aspects that I'm very good at? I know I can work better than the programming aspect, because I know you talk about Python, and during my college days I didn't do any of the advanced programs. So it's like I'm still going backward. I'm struggling on that aspect. So is it possible that someone without no good knowledge of programming can still have the data analytical skills, can be a good data analyst? I think that is it.
Yeah. So yeah, good question. So the first part of the answer I'll give is short answer is yes. There are folks that actually specialize in data visualization, and that's what they do, and that's what they're good at. I've had someone like that at Zillow, where he was pretty much our Tableau expert. There was no any question anyone had in the entire company, they came to him because he was just a Tableau expert and he was just great at that. So there is definitely an opportunity to do that. At Convoy, a manager who actually sat next to me was also sort of like, he was hired because he was a Tableau expert, and that's how he ran Tableau for the whole company. And eventually, like, there are certain times we have sort of conversation. I'm like, oh my goodness, you're so good at storytelling, you're so good at that. And he's like, yeah, I know I'm not good technically, so I have to make up my skills somewhere else, right? But in general, I think the advice is to start where you're strong. I know these numbers aren't like accurate, but someone said, focus 80% of your energy on what you're great at and 20% on what you want to learn where you're not strong, right? So by all means, I would say yes, start from a point of strength and build from there. The other piece I would say is while you focus on your strengths, understand the environment or the context or maybe where you want to go. If you just want to be a Tableau expert and the opportunities for that, then by all means, that's fine. And the other case, if you need more, then you can think about, is there some kind of base level competency that I want to achieve, right, in the other areas? I'm going to focus majority on what I'm really good at, and people are going to remember me for that, and that's how I'm going to add most of the value. But when it comes to that stuff, I still want to be able to add I still want to have some base level of understanding, right? And then I need to figure out how to do that and what the best ways to do that. I know this probably will not be comforting in any way, or it's easier said than done. And I understand that, for me, it came a bit easier. One of the things to think about when it comes to programming is to break it. If you're at the end of the day, there are just very few concepts, right, that everything is wrapped around. And so if you can focus on those concepts and just break it, because many times we think about programming and we think like it's this huge stuff, right? But at the end of the day, we can break it out to just like the basic components, right? There is some kind of logical order things going, and then there's some kind of like conditions, right? The if, whens, while, all that stuff. And if you find a good program, whether it's someone in person or a good program online, something that is sort of very entry level, that breaks it down, maybe that can help at least. What I'm trying to overcome here is this fear that I'm not good at programming or programming is overwhelming. But maybe if you can demystify what's involved, then maybe at least you can get some kind of comfort level to develop a sense of like base competence. Now, that being said, there are opportunities, so the more you know, the wider the opportunities, but there are still definitely opportunities that specialize in data visualization, and you can have a successful career in that. But the other piece don't hurt as well. Yeah.
I think Lydia had a question. That's the last three questions, I think. Do you want to go first, Lydia, with the question?
I also have a question, please.
Okay, sure.
Good evening. Good evening.
Oh, good evening. How you doing?
Yeah, please, I have a question with regards to what the last person just talked about here in Africa, especially in Nigeria. We really don't have good hands that take data science. Like in my school, I did computer science as my first degree. And during my final year, I actually wanted to specialize in data science, but my supervisor insisted I should not because he cannot carry it. He is not good at that. And now I'm trying to apply for my master's. Unfortunately, with the nature of my work, I can't go anywhere else except the university where I'm working because I'm not on leave. And unfortunately, they don't do any other thing. They just do computer science at master's level. There is no specialization. It's not streamlined. It's just a general computer science thing. And now I'm having issue of, okay, what if I get to the time I'm to do my project and then I'm not also being allowed to specialize in the data field that I want to do? I don't know how to get a balance because this online training, they actually help. That has actually been what has been helping me. But I don't know if there is a way, and then if there are other programs that you can recommend that one can do, at least to boost the person's knowledge on these things. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I would say some of the stuff we've touched on different parts of it before, so we can borrow from there. But I think essentially the way I think about it is, let me take a step back. I admit I'm not familiar with what all the options that we have back home are. And but I think the nice thing though is the internet is trying to democratize things, right? And so in terms of sort of like being exposed to what's not available, so essentially if the programs you have are limiting, right, there is no value in staying within the limits and expecting something different, right? So it means we have to break through the limits, right? So the question is like, what are our options for breaking out of the limitations that we find ourselves? So definitely we'll have to go beyond what the direct programs have and the direct instructors or advisors. We shouldn't listen to the advisors in terms of like limiting our potential. But I would say use the resources available. If I'm more familiar with online resources, definitely just search on YouTube and all of that stuff, Coursera, all that stuff. Try to get exposed there. I'm not sure what the in-person options are, but I think one thing I would say is you should all give yourself credit, right, for being part of this program, and definitely kudos to Emmanuel for setting up this program. Share with each other, right? Use each other for resources. Somebody may have discovered something that was actually very useful and they can share with everybody else, and you can leverage the knowledge that each of you has, and bringing that together. So anyway, the first part of my answer is really about beyond acknowledging the challenges and my limited visibility to the in-person opportunities. There is utilize the opportunities wherever you find them. So if it's online opportunities, by all means utilize it. It's just amazing how much free content there is on YouTube. I haven't paid for an online course. Maybe I've paid for one or two, but the majority of my learnings come not from free resources. Yeah, you guys may be familiar with this or not. There is Coursera, where they actually walk you step by step, and you don't pay unless you want to get a certificate, right? So it's something you can take initially, see if you like it, see if it works out, then you can pay down the road. There are just a ton of resources on YouTube. So in terms of like moving outside the confines, find out what's there, right? And that's the first piece. Then the second piece is to help the knowledge stick, you have to solve, like I find that using it is the most practical situation. The ideal way of using it would be if you have a business situation, like if you're employed and you have a work opportunity to use it there. But even using it in something in a non-work situation, what I like about the work situation is there is somebody to hold you accountable. But if you can, as long as you have somebody that can hold you accountable, whether it's somebody that's paying your making your paycheck, or somebody that's a non-profit or that's not paying you but can still hold you accountable, knowing that you're doing this for the experience, or if you can hold yourself accountable. But I find that many times we're not good judges of holding ourselves accountable, especially when, well, sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. But having somebody else who has the problem and then sort of sets a bar for holding ourselves accountable. In many programs, like in the data science program I went through, we have a period where we're working on a capstone project and we're trying to solve a problem for somebody. And in many cases, most of the people who are solving problems for are nonprofits that have problems. So it's just a way to, one, move from the theoretical knowledge you can learn online or wherever you get it, and actually solve something practical and get that experience. So if it's paid, ideal. If not, you can actually do something that helps someone, and then you get the physical experience. So hopefully that was helpful and I answered your question.
Do you want to go next, Lydia?
Please. Hi.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you
Hello.
very,
Okay.
very much.
So I have a question too.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah. Good. Okay.
Let's
So
let Lydia
maybe
go
Lydia.
first, and then yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Lydia.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, sorry. I came in a bit late actually, but I wanted to know. I've not had an opportunity to do programming, and I have also not used Python, but I've used SQL. So I needed to know, can somebody like me actually do data science, or how can I have some assistance to be able to be on the same page with every other person?
Yeah, no, good question. I'll tell you this, right? This may be controversial,
Okay.
but it's difficult for me to think of a data scientist that's successful that doesn't know SQL. So the fact that you know SQL is something that it's a good starting point, right? And
Okay.
so definitely take advantage of that, hone in on those skills. And if you want to go down the path of like data engineering or all that SQL is going to be a huge part of it. SQL is a huge part of data science, no matter how you slice and dice it. So definitely take focus on that. And then in terms of programming and Python, what I'll encourage there is to give it a shot, right? Try it out. Kind of the same way we've talking about, like find resources that work for you. What works for different people is very different. Some people like in person, some people like online, some people like something complicated, some people like something simple. But if you have the opportunity, search online, find out the resources that work for you, start from there, practice them out, see if it makes sense. So short answer is yes, you can be successful without Python. Yes, you can be successful without Python. But Python does open a few more opportunities that would be useful. But you can definitely start a career without Python and then learn that later down the road.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Hello. I have a question, please.
Sure.
Okay, so can I please go a little bit personal?
Sure.
Just a little. Okay. So okay, I'm from Nigeria, and I'm sure you are too. So you're familiar with the 1 year service after your degree. Okay, so I'm actually having my youth service currently, and the journey of learning stuff about data science and analysis has been wonderful. But I've had this little fear, sort of like I'm going to be hit with reality once I'm done with my service, and I might not be so much qualified to even apply for an entry role, because I really would love to move directly like into data science. So are there opportunities out there that can help me, maybe volunteering services or paid internship? I don't know, that can help me sustain me a little, but still keep me on my feet on my career path as a data scientist?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We just have to find them. And all opportunities, I mean, there are multiple ways to, essentially what we're trying to do, right, is we're trying to build this experience or this context, right, of data science experience. And so there are multiple ways to do it. Definitely getting a paid job is maybe most preferable to most people. Before that, getting maybe an unpaid internship, or sorry, a paid internship would be next. Maybe unpaid internship. That's controversial, but it depends on where you stand on that. The other is getting an entry-level role. And I think the entry-level role, what I like about it is that you're still getting paid, and then you're creating opportunities to learn more and to kind of like build your skills, right? So all of that opportunities, there are definitely lots of nonprofits out there, or people that can't afford to pay but have huge data science problems. So those are all opportunities. I think if I were to summarize it, I would say to be successful, and success in this case could mean either starting a data science career or advancing your career. There are more than two, but I'll focus on two things for this conversation. One is knowledge, and the other is experience. And knowledge is just anything you learn, however you learn it. In school, online, YouTube, formal, informal, it doesn't matter. It's knowledge, right? And then there is experience, right? And then experience is like, what have you done with the knowledge you have? And it's not just one versus the other, right? Or one before the other. Both of them, the value of experience is that experience will tell you what you still need to learn about your knowledge, what the gaps are for your knowledge. And so however you get the knowledge or however you get the experience, focus on getting both of them, right? Knowledge, once again, could be any way: online, in person, formal, informal, all of that. Experience could be paid, unpaid, for a business, for a nonprofit, for whatever the case might be, even for a hobby. But you want to sort of continuously increase the size of your knowledge bag. You want that to keep getting bigger, and you want your experience bag to keep getting bigger. And if you focus on those two things, and then focus on how do you get those bags to be bigger, whether it's internships, whatever the opportunities are, then the chances of having a successful entry into the field or a successful progression, I think, would be a lot higher. And once you have those, then other things will begin to fill in down the road.
Okay, thank you.
So the last two questions, I suppose, now at this point. I have one question actually to wrap things up.
Sure.
So I guess what did you find as the evolution of your duties, going from junior to intermediate to senior, but to your manager rather? Like, how did your duties change through those transitions? Yeah.
Okay, so sort of, if I understand the question, it's like, how do you move from junior to medium, intermediate to senior?
So it's more from, I guess, like the question is just to clarify, how do your duties change as you transition from junior to senior to a manager? Like,
I see.
What is your role now versus what it was in the beginning, I suppose?
I see. Okay, no, that's a great question. So the way I think about it, let me see if okay. So the big picture is sort of like, what's your scope, right? What's your focus? So in the very early days of your career, the question is, what can you do, right? And it's sort of very focused on the impact you can have. And then along the way, it's sort of like, what can you do with people around you, right? So what can you do in a team, right? How do you make a team better? How do you increase the impact of the people around you? When you get to a manager, nobody gives a damn what you do. At least for good managers, nobody gives a damn what you do. Everything, my job is really, how do I make the people that report to me be great at their jobs, right? And so I still have to understand Python, but not because I'm going to code, but because I'm going to help somebody be better at Python. I'm still going to understand business analytics, not because I'm going to deliver some analysis. And yeah, sometimes I may have to, but because I'm going to help somebody else deliver better business analytics, right? And to be honest, it also moves a bit from the technical piece to more of the softer skills, right? It's more about being able to understand what's going to make somebody more productive, right? What's frustrating someone at work, and how do you get rid of that? How do you remove roadblocks? How do you help somebody? How do you create a vision so others can drive towards it? So in the very early beginning of your career, right, it's really about what you can do. So one analogy we typically use, this may be helpful or not, and maybe I'll butcher it, but you can think of like different levels. At the very early level, you're told what to do and how to do it, right? And then at some point, you're being told what to do, but not how to do it. You figure out how to do it, right? And then at some point, you're not being told what to do. You're sort of figuring out what you should do, right? And at some point, you begin to tell people what to do, right? What we should do as a team, right? Not just what you should do. And along that way, you begin to tell people, you begin to tell the whole a larger group of people, right? So you can think of like a small team to like a department and all of that. And your scope then just begins to increase in saying, you begin to tell a lot of people like, this is what to do, right? And so when you think about even the CEO, right, the CEO is telling everybody, this is what we need to do as a company. So essentially, the scope that changes is sort of what you're responsible for, and then the impact you're having along the way. One key thing here is that nothing about this talks about authority, but it's about being able to set a vision. Like the most successful leaders and managers are setting visions, and then they're allowing people to execute against that vision. So even when I said telling people what to do, it's not like commanding people what to do. It's by about making a case that says, you know what, here's what I think we should do. Here's the idea, and then having people buy into it.
And as a last question, Bamidele, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, and I'll say I'm flexible to keep going if folks still want to keep going. But if you guys have a time restriction, then I'll respect that. Yeah.
Okay, if there are more questions, that's fine, I suppose. Just worried about you.
Okay, no, I'm totally fine. Especially if you guys are finding value from this, I can keep going until you guys run out of questions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Charles. And we are definitely getting a lot of value from this session.
I'm glad to hear.
We're definitely getting a lot of value from this session. It's my first session, I guess, with this program, and definitely it won't be my last now. I'm really good for the opportunity. I have a question to ask, and actually two questions. The first one I want to ask, I'm very pragmatic, right? Data science, and I'll start with let me give you my background. Let me give you my let me put it in context. I used to have a boss like 2 years ago. He used to tell me everything we don't say is AI, right? AI. He used to just call the word AI. And I was like, okay, this AI stuff. And I said, okay, so this was my first interaction with, should I say, data science, AI, ML was sometime last year. One of these courses you spoke, I saw one of the courses and I actually enrolled for AI. I've never coded. I don't know anything about Python, any other thing. So when they called me before they admitted me, they asked some questions. When they knew I had no coding experience, they advised I took a course on data science and business analytics. And just to encourage most of the guys on the call also that had mentioned their lack of experience in coding. May last year, I used to think printing had to do with a printer. So I had no idea what printing meant. You get, I didn't like, it was REs, I didn't like any other things. But gladly, within a period of time, I've been able to, because I'm done with that course. It took me about 8 months. I did my capstone project, right? I'm happy I've done it, right? But what I want to now ask is this, because my capstone project was on an insurance company that had default. Their subscribers were defaulting in paying their premiums, right? I got a high score in my project. I did well in it, right? But I just want to know, is this really what people do day to day? Because you see, in my day-to-day job, I'm a business. I'm a business development. I'm in that field. You get. I don't open. You wouldn't see Python, R, or Tableau on my system on a day-to-day job. That's not what I do. But I've learned from this call, as you mentioned also, that every opportunity we use, we should use it. But I want to find out that's my capstone project that was about people who are defaulting in premium payments. Yes, I used all my predictive tools. I had to add an imbalanced data with balanced data. The initial reading was low. We had to do some adjustments to the true positive rates, and we got something. And we also got certain things that were addressing the reasons for the default. But is that really what it is? I just want to. The old data science. Is this what really obtains in business? Is this what people are expected to do? Am I on the right path, or is there more I need to do? You get, because I'm happy I can do that now, but is that all, right? If I can do this properly, if I can do more of this my capstone project, am I ready for the field of data science?
Yeah. So
okay, that's my question. And how does?
Go ahead. Can you hear me?
So I was just saying that. Yes, I can hear you. So I want to just know if that's all, right? Is that really all? Taking data from data, making it information. Doing the EDs, tidying it up, predicting, building the models, getting your important variables, and answering the question. And is that really all? Is that what really a data science is expected to do? I just want to understand if I'm on the right path.
Yeah, no, good question. So the answer varies by company and by role, but the short answer is no. The short answer is that piece is probably at the end of a longer journey that gets you to that piece, right? So what I mean by that is, in the real world, you don't have very well defined problems like we see in a classroom, right? And so how do you get from the raw problems to that, right? Is you have to do a lot of the analytics and a lot of the data cleaning and business clarification and all of that stuff. So it does happen. It's a part of the job, but a lot of the business world problems are not as clean as we find in the classroom. So in some cases you will do it, and in some cases you won't for a long time. It just depends on what the business needs are. But yes, that's part of what data science is. And the point you made earlier is AI is sort of like a buzzword that people get thrown around. The more familiar you get into data science, you'll realize that all machine learning and AI and all that stuff is about getting data, right, like a table, and then getting something out on the other end, right? But yes, the ways you do that are complex and all that stuff. Anyway, so yes, they're buzzwords. Don't let buzzwords intimidate you. They're not always as buzzy or as cool as they make them sound. A lot of data science time is spent like just in data, cleaning data, working with data. There is some machine learning piece, but to do good machine learning, you or somebody have to have done that. How to have done that piece. Let me actually, I think I've able to get my screen sharing to work. So I'll start with the, I don't know if you guys have seen this stuff called the data science pyramid of needs. They are very different versions. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, we can.
Perfect, cool. So,
yes, you can.
Okay, thanks. So what I'll do, you know what? Yeah, let me see, where do I start from here? Okay, this may just be a good place to start here. Okay. So we talk about like what data science means and the different types, and there's sort of like 3 buckets of data science, right? When I think about data science job families, like there's a data engineer, which we talked about. You're focused on SQL, you're focused on moving and transforming data at scale and doing it efficiently. One example is here, your data science. If you think about a house, the data engineer is the plumber, right? Your job is to get water into the house, and you're worried about, okay, how do I get water to the toilet? How do I get water to the kitchen? How do I get water to the bathroom? How do I get to the first floor, to the second floor? And that's your big focus, right? It's just getting water to the house, right? And then you can think of the data scientists in many companies. They are generalists, right? And so they're like, okay, now I have water. How do I make sure when I open the tap, right, I get the water? How do I use the water? What am I using it for? Am I using it to wash my clothes, to wash the plates, to cook, to do all that kind of stuff, right? There is a lot of different ways of using it, and the way they ask you for it would be varied, and you'll be working a lot more with the people that live in the house and telling them all that stuff. And then we have this applied scientist or the research scientist, and then they're usually very focused, right? So you may have one applied scientist that is a cook. All they do is they use water to cook food, right? And that's all they know how to. That's what they focus on, is cooking with water. And somebody else is another type of applied scientist, right? And all they use water for is like maybe washing the bathrooms, right? Kind of deal, and that's all they focus on, right? And so that's like the NLPs and all that stuff, right? So that's how you think about the 3 job families. Okay, and so to kind of build on the last question that we just talked about, right? There is this whole concept of data science hierarchy of needs, right? It comes from like an adaptation of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which pretty much says that before you move to the next level, you need to have at least done something at the previous level, right? You need to have met your needs. And so when you think about the beginning of data, there is some kind of instrumentation or some kind of source of data that's coming in. If it's from software, then you have to instrument the software and all that. If it's business, then you have to have some kind of business process that brings in the data, right? And then you have to sort of move the data or transform the data, right? Actually, you have to move the data and store the data. How do you do all of that stuff? And then you have to clean and transform the data. Getting through sort of these first 3 steps is sort of what a typical data engineer would do, right? This is sort of like the plumbing. We need to know what the central source for water is. We need to connect it to the house, and then we need to move all the pipes inside the walls, and then we need to at some point set up the tap and have the faucet, right, in the house. And then you mature, right? And this is the business maturing as well, right? You mature into sort of analytics metrics, segmenting, aggregates, features, all that stuff. So like just making sense of the data, right? It's sort of this middle space. And the truth is that this is where most of data, that this triangle, this space isn't drawn to scale, but this is the bulk of what data science in many cases is all about, right? And then you can move from that into some kind of like, okay, simple ML algorithms, doing experimentation or A/B testing, all of that stuff. And so that's a lot of the bulk of it. And then finally, you go into the deep, the very specialized stuff, right? Here they call it AI, deep learning, think of NLP, all that stuff falls into these buckets. And so a data scientist, a generalist, this is the biggest, well, one of the biggest roles that you'll find. Actually, maybe everything is changing, but a lot of people starting off in their career start off either data scientist / analyst or data engineer. And then the research or applied scientist, most times they're looking for more advanced people who already have an experience in doing this. As you can see, you need to be able to understand a bit of all of this before you go up here. You don't have to understand everything, but you understand a bit more about it, right? And so, yeah, that's one way to think about data science and the different families within data science. And all of these have different names that different companies call them, but they're sort of like try to break them into 3 buckets. And then, okay. And then when I think about the skills you need to have in each of these buckets, so for data engineer, having SQL is just critical. Like I can't imagine being successful as a data engineer without understanding SQL, and then understanding some kind of ETL, the transformation of data, and then software, some kind of software engineering. All of these are important for a data engineer. The stats are optional, machine learning, and business acumen. And I will context this by saying this is sort of how things mostly work in the US. I know it might be different in Nigeria and all that, but it's just a high level context. And then the interesting thing is about the data science is that you sort of just need to be able to touch everything. Sometimes the skills you need are basic, but the most important thing you need as a data scientist, I think, to be successful in most careers is one, this business acumen, and then this SQL, right? Those are the 2 things that really become very valuable. And then having everything else becomes like a plus on top of that, right? You can have a very successful data science career without ever doing machine learning or without doing machine learning for many years or many months, right? The stats would be good to have. It makes you more efficient and more successful. And then in the research scientists, depending on how pure they try to make it, sometimes you don't even need SQL. Like sometimes you may get your SQL yourself. Sometimes you may have someone that builds the SQL for you. But then the skills now become, the huge focus now becomes on stats and machine learning. And then the business acumen, depending on where you work. I think that having business acumen is just a plus, no matter what you do, but it varies from company to company and role to role. Yeah, this is the video I talked about, talk about performance currency and relationship currency. This is just where I think about things I share with my team. That talks about, you know, just what I'm looking for eventually, right? This is assuming you've done the basics of being able to like have that knowledge and experience. Once you have those, you're in the door. How do you succeed in the door, right? How do you succeed in the role? And the first is technical growth. You have to continue growing. You're never done growing. And then you have to move from just doing work to actually making an impact, right? It's like, I built a model, cool. What's the so what, right? What impact did it have? What did it change? What are we doing differently as a business or as a company because of that? We talked about storytelling and communication. I think it's just an important skill to have as a data scientist, because if you build a model and nobody knows about it or nobody knows why it's useful, then it's actually the value is very highly diminished. So you need to be able to tell people, why is this important? Why can I? Why should they care? Right? What impact have you been able to do? We talked a little bit about influence, right? Where we talked about, I think to Emmanuel's question, like how do you go from like a junior to intermediate to senior to even a manager? The focus here is influence, right? And what I tell people is the nice thing about data science is that you don't need authority. Assuming you're in a healthy environment, right? The data speaks for itself, right? And when you show people that, hey, look, our profits are going down, it's not Charles saying profits are going down. The data says profits is going down, right? But the key here is that you want to, and the soft skills also matter here, but you want to be able to influence your stakeholders or your team to be able to move in a certain direction because of the data and the communication and all of that stuff that you do. And then as you begin to grow in your career, you want to begin to take more initiative and more ownership of your area as you begin to progress through the different roles. And then this is just key for everything, is growth mindset. I don't know if you guys are very familiar with it, but there is this idea of a fixed mindset versus growth mindset. There are lots of, there's a YouTube talk. So it was an idea that a lady called Carol Dweck actually formalized, but the idea of a fixed mindset says, I am born with my skills, and those are the skills I have, and that's how I'm going to succeed or fail in life. And the growth mindset is, I'm learning, right? And I'm going to keep learning, and everything is a learning experience. Whether I succeed or I fail, I'm still learning, and the skills and my abilities are not limited with what I know today, but more about what I'm able to learn, right? And so growth mindset is something that's just important for everybody at all stages. I know we've had a lot of conversations about, different challenges we have, the limitations, the inferiority complex, all of that stuff, right? I would encourage folks to sort of think about a growth mindset and sort of say, you know what, where I am today is just where I am today. What's more important is where I am today is not a limit or a limitation, or it doesn't dictate what my future is going to look like. What's going to make the difference, right, is what I'm going to do to be successful. In the book that she actually wrote, which I read and I recommend if you have the time for it, is she talks about when we, and I'm paraphrasing here, but when we hear about very successful people, like we hear about Michael Jordan and we hear about all these folks, right? Many times we're hearing about them at the end of their journey, right? But what we don't learn, we don't hear about is what they had to do to get to that point, right? And she talks about how Michael Jordan practices and the number of hours he puts into it, right? And so it's just something to keep at the back of our minds that, in many cases, it's not always true. There's also privilege and opportunity and all of that stuff. But in many cases, right, our potential isn't just about sort of what life has done to us, but also what we can do, right, and what we can do to sort of make that gap. And in many cases, in certain conditions, the ability to self-improve would outweigh wherever people started from. And so if it's not a race, but if you think about somebody who's at the 5 mile mark and you're at a 0 mile mark, if you run faster than they're running, you'll eventually catch up and succeed, right? Not that we should compare ourselves with others, but if you could think about in terms of potential, it's not so important to where you start from, whether you have a computer science degree or whether you know programming or what your first degree is. What's actually more important, what's more deterministic of your future, is how fast are you willing to run this race? How quickly are you willing to learn what you don't know? How quickly are you willing to discover what you don't know that you have to learn? And how much effort are you going to give? It's going to knock you down. Like, I've been in classes, I've taken some topics where it's like, holy crap, I have no idea what's going on. This does not sound like English anymore, right? But how do you pick yourself up and how do you find other resources to kind of like get back in the race and keep running? I can skip this one, but this is just about talking about sort of the relationship currency of the soft skill. Data science were usually in service of others. I know cultures may be different, but it's sort of like we're supporting people, right? They're like our customers. We have to treat them like our customers. This is just a point that, data science, we know it's becoming a crowded field. And in my first job, I worked with someone who was so unpleasant to work with, but he was so smart. But we kept him at the company because he was just so smart and nobody could do what he could do. And what we did is that we just prevented him from meeting with any customer or anybody that was important. And so we bring the information to him and he solves it and he codes it behind the scenes, but we never let him talk to everybody. So we tolerated him, right? But that's not going to happen in many companies. Like, data scientists are just a dime a dozen. Like, there are just so many of us in the field. So if you're a jerk, very few companies will tolerate you. And if you are actually someone that's good to work with, people will help you. And you also have to help people, right? Bring out the best in others is one of the values we had at Convoy. But you can also help people. And that's really how you build those relationships, right? There's something you're going to be good at. There's something that you're great at. How do you help other people with that? And then others will also help you too. There is this interesting thing. There is also a book called Persuasion, right? And the whole idea is that, it's a lot easier to get somebody to do something for you if you've done something for them, right? And so, I won't go into detail about it, but even businesses do it, right? They give you a free trial, right, on all of that stuff. But it's the same with human relationships, right? In different ways, help people with what you have, people are more likely to help you. And like I said, it's not about being the smartest person in the room. And then the other thing too, this is something that's important in careers, and you'll hear about it too in the video, is it's one thing for me to come and tell you guys that, oh my goodness, I'm so awesome. I wrote the best model and this is so great. I'm the best data scientist, at my company. And it's something else for someone at my company to come and say, you know what, Charles is so awesome. Like, which do you think has more weight, right? And so being able to think of it as, be work in a way that people sort of sing your praises, right? And I'll tell you this, it may not be as relevant, but when I'm trying to help my employees, I can always tell my manager, like, oh, look at what this person did. But when I can take a screenshot of like, oh, see what they said about this person and just send it, it's just like, oh my goodness, mic drop, right? I don't have to say anything. I don't have to put any more effort in there. Okay. This is the recruiting process that happens mostly in the US, so I don't know how it works in Nigeria. But the whole idea is like there's a resume review. There's usually some kind of initial conversation with a recruiter or hiring manager. Some companies have like a tech screen or take-home assignments, and then there is the on-site. The key thing about the on-site, and this may be relevant too, is people are always evaluating you for your technical skills, what you bring to the table, and your behavioral, right? The behavioral, this pretty much everything we're saying about, would I want to work with you, right? I know you're smart, but would I want to work with you? Technical is, are you smart? Can you do the job? Behavioral is like, do we want to work with you? Do we want you to, are you the kind of person that others will want to work with? And when all that is done, then there is some kind of people get in a room and they decide their perspectives, right? And then they make a decision, and then they follow up either with a yes or a go or not go. Once again, I recognize that these tips are maybe more relevant to the US. But in terms of how you think about your resume, some of them are going to be more relevant in the US, some of them may be more applicable. In terms of resume, try to keep it to 1 page, but if it's longer than 1 page, make it count, right? So if I'm reading more than 1 page of resume and it's all fluff, then I'm like, okay, that's what's the point, right? But if the second page is like really adding a lot of value, I'm like, okay, I get it. This makes a lot of sense. And this may also be relevant for like as you get higher in your career. The one thing to keep in mind, at least in the US, is that we review and decide on the resume in a very short amount of time. So I can review, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I can do over 100 in like less than 30 minutes, right? And so it's not like it's not like we're doing some kind of deep analysis on your resume or doing research on your resume and getting additional points. So make sure that your resume just pops out, that the most important thing comes out, and people don't have to go deep or search for it, and that if people are browsing, that the most important things pop out. So I kind of talked a little bit about this earlier. It's like, when you think about your experience, don't just say, I did this, but say, so what, right? I did this and this is the impact it had. Talk about your education, right? Whatever courses you've taken, whatever courses, whether it's online, formal, informal, try to find a way to kind of like surface it so people know. And then skills and accomplishments, also something nice to have. For folks, and this is maybe more relevant for folks with PhDs, but include like publications or portfolios. I don't know how common GitHub is. Some people include their GitHub repo. To be honest, I rarely look at GitHub repos, but just the whole idea here is that your resume is going to be reviewed in a very short amount of time. Make it count, make it pop out. Look for resources online for resume and for how to like have a good resume and all of that stuff. This is just a pet peeve, but I'll share it. Is there was a time when there was this advice that said, if you have a LinkedIn profile, don't put a job title in your thing, but say like, oh, I make this better or I do that better. I don't like that because for me, I have no idea what that means. So when you think about your LinkedIn profile, try to make it something that tells people about you. I think there's room to talk about like subjective and abstract stuff, maybe in your summary or stuff, but at least let your job title be informative. To be honest, a lot of hiring managers that use LinkedIn to search for jobs are searching on job title. So if it's not something that's standard, then it makes it a bit difficult. So this was all this one is something this presentation was actually done for my for UW where I went to school there. But pretty much the main idea is like brush up on what you already know and learn what you don't know, and then find real opportunities to practice. So if you're taking classes, before you go for an interview, refresh. I print out like my lecture notes before I go for an interview because I forget many of the things. Learn what you need to learn. It's important to know what you don't know. So learn what you need to learn. YouTube, Coursera, whatever courses you have. Think about experiences when you're preparing for the interview, and then practice. A couple things to keep in mind, and this may once again be more relevant for the US. There are tools or websites like HackerRank and Glassdoor that have like common interview questions, so you can browse for those and kind of like see what other people have, what kind of questions other people have been asked. You may not be asked the exact same thing, but you can always try to figure you can at least begin to get a sense. And then role play, find a friend or somebody, because many times things sound really good in your head, but when you start to say it out, you may stumble. So just find a friend to just practice with before you go for an interview. And then just like I said, understand the and emphasize the impact, the so what of what you did. Let's see. Yeah, definitely research a company you're applying for, talk about them, ask great questions. This one I think is also key. It's sort of like do all the prep you need to do, but a day before, like make sure that you're well prepared for the interview, right? Sleep well, eat well, relax, meditate, whatever it is that happens, right? It's not the end of the world. It's just one interview. You're going to be judged by people who who know very little about you in a very short amount of time. So it's not always a reflection of you. And not every interview will go well. Many times you will fail. I've failed many interviews. But what's important is, okay, understand that, okay, take the time you need to understand, okay, something went wrong here. Try to learn what it is that went wrong, and then figure out what you need to do. Then just pick up and then get back in the game. Yeah, cool. So that's the deck I had shared earlier. Let me see if there's anything else. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So hopefully that was helpful to you guys.
Thank you. It is. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Charles.
You're all very welcome.
Okay, please. Your presentation. Is there a way we can get it?
Yes. Let me find a way to share. You know what? Let me. It is.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me do this now.
You can help us get it on our Slack page.
Emmanuel, Percy, can you guys help us get the slide and send to us?
So I just sent it. So you can post it. The early part of it is not up to date. It doesn't have the about me isn't correct, up to date. But yeah, you can. I just sent it to you guys in the link. Okay, cool. Any other questions, or should we call it a wrap here? Cool. Well, thank you all for listening, and thanks for having me. Hopefully this was useful, and best of luck in whatever stage you are. Just remember, it's not as important where you are. It's more important how much effort you're going to give, right? A story comes to mind, and maybe I'll just end. You're welcome. Maybe I'll just end on this. It's one of my favorite stories before. It's like somebody wakes up in the middle of the night, right? And they're really thirsty and they want to drink milk. But they are too tired. So they just lay down in bed, right? And that's how bad the person wants the milk. And then somebody else wakes up and they're very tired, but they wake up and they go to the fridge, and there's no milk in the fridge, so they go back to bed. And that's how bad they want the milk. And somebody else wakes up in the middle of the night, they go to the fridge, there's no milk. They close the fridge, they put on their shoes, and they go to the store. But there's no milk in the store either. The store, the shelves are empty. And they go back home, right? And so you can essentially, the whole moral of the story is that you can just keep going on. And sometimes we're limited by how badly we want something or how much effort we're willing to put in stuff. So I want to encourage you. I know there are real restrictions and there are real challenges out there, but just encourage you guys that it doesn't matter where you are right now. If this is something that you're really passionate about and you're willing to put the work, I hope that you do find success and that the success does come quicker for you. But the truth is that there's a lot of hard work that goes into it behind the scenes. And if you have the opportunity or the ability to put in that effort, then most likely the outcomes will be positive. So with that, thanks everyone for listening, and
Thank you so much.
it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chat. Thank you.
Yeah, so Emmanuel couldn't make it to the end of the meeting, so thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate your time, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Sounds good. Cool. Take care, everyone.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.